My husband, Jason Miller, held the marriage certificate in his hand and cheerfully led his first love, Emily, back to the house that used to be our home. But when he slid the key into the lock, he froze in confusion. The lock had been changed. The door opened to reveal a polite, unfamiliar man who asked, "Are you here to see the house? It was just listed for sale yesterday." Jason stood there, stunned as if struck by lightning, and called me, shouting in fury. I calmly replied, "The house is mine. You and I were never married. What are you doing back here?" The early summer air at sunset carried its thick, humid warmth mixed with the scent of freshly turned earth. Jason stood outside the house, holding Emily's hand. His face glowed with a happiness I hadn't seen in years, bright and pure, like a child who had just gotten back his favorite candy. He pulled out a key and smoothly inserted it into the lock, but it wouldn't turn. He tried again, using a bit more strength, yet the lock resisted with a harsh metallic screech that made one's skin crawl. His smile stiffened, and his brows drew together. "That's strange. Is the lock broken?" Emily, standing beside him, spoke softly. Her gentle voice carried just the right amount of concern to make her seem tender and considerate. Unwilling to give up, Jason twisted the key several more times, then finally lost his patience and kicked the door hard. The heavy wooden door let out a deep, dull sound that echoed through the house, loud enough to wake someone inside. The door opened, but it wasn't me standing there. It was a man in a crisp white shirt with a name tag, wearing the kind of polite, professional smile typical of someone in customer service. "Hello," he said courteously. "Are you here to see the house? It was just listed yesterday. The layout is very practical, and there's great natural lighting." He was a real estate agent. Jason's mind went blank, buzzing as though a hammer had struck him. He stood frozen, staring past the agent's shoulder into the living room, where several strangers wearing shoe covers walked around, pointing and commenting as they assessed the space. That sofa, I had chosen it myself. Those curtains, I had carefully picked out layer by layer. Every tile, every piece of furniture in that house had been part of the journey Jason and I once built together. And now, everything was laid bare under the cold white light, turned into a commodity for strangers to scrutinize and price. Jason stood there motionless, like a stone statue worn down by time. "See the house? What's there to see? This is my house," he nearly shouted, the veins in his neck bulging with rage. The agent paused for a moment, then quickly pulled a file from his bag. His voice was calm and even, like reading from a pre-written script. "Sir, the owner of this house is Ms. Hannah Lee. She authorized our company to handle the sale. If you have any questions, you can contact her directly." My name, Hannah Lee, fell like a sharp, icy blade, cutting straight through Jason's fragile illusion. He turned sharply toward Emily, his eyes almost tearing through her face as if demanding an explanation. But Emily's expression was full of shock and innocence, making it clear she had no idea what was happening. Jason staggered back a few steps, pulling out his phone with trembling hands. He was shaking so hard it took him 3 tries to dial my number. The moment I answered, before I could even say hello, his furious voice exploded through the speaker. "Hannah, are you out of your mind? Who gave you the right to sell my house? What the hell were you thinking?" I calmly moved the phone away from my ear, waited for his shouting to fade, then slowly brought it back. My voice was soft and even, as if we were talking about the weather. "The house is mine." "Yours? What do you mean yours? We're husband and wife. That's our house," Jason shouted over the phone. I let out a short laugh, a sound completely void of emotion. "Did you forget already? You just went and registered your marriage with someone else today, didn't you? I never married you, so what exactly are you doing back at my house?" On the other end, there was a sudden, furious silence, so quiet I couldn't even hear him breathing. Then, a second later, Emily's sharp, high-pitched voice pierced through the line like it was meant to split eardrums. "Jason, how could she do that? How can she be so heartless? We're the ones who truly love each other." Her shrill, screeching tone was grating and fake, like a rusty knife scraping across raw nerves. "Hannah Lee, you just wait," Jason managed to yell, his voice breaking. "If you don't give that house back, I'll make you regret it." It was a hollow threat, weak, weightless, and utterly meaningless. I didn't bother replying, I simply hung up. Then, with one tap, I added his number to my block list. The world suddenly fell silent in the most peaceful way. I stood by the tall glass window, looking down at the bustling street below. The city's neon lights filtered through the glass, hazy and blurred, like watercolors bleeding on canvas. 5 days ago had been our 3rd wedding anniversary. The weather was beautiful that day, so bright it almost hurt to look at the sky. I had been carrying a cake I baked myself, along with a limited edition watch I'd pre-ordered 2 weeks earlier. My heart was light and happy, like a girl in love for the first time, as I stood outside the marriage registration office waiting for him. Jason had told me that day would bring a surprise. I waited, and I really did get one. I blinked as I saw him walk out of the building. He was wearing the same white shirt I had ironed for him the night before. His hand was intertwined with Emily's, his unforgettable first love. They walked out together from the marriage office, holding 2 brand new red booklets, marriage certificates. In front of the sign for the Office of Marriage and Family Affairs, they embraced and kissed passionately, without a hint of shame, as if the world had disappeared around them. It was like watching the perfect ending to a romantic movie, except I wasn't the heroine. In that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or make a scene. I just felt something inside me drain away completely, leaving only emptiness and silence. Every emotion was crushed until all that remained was confusion, cold and numb. So this was the surprise he had promised me. Turns out, in his beautiful love story, I was just the extra. The cake in my hands slipped and hit the ground hard, splattering cream and fruit everywhere. The mess stained the gray pavement like a blurred, bitter farewell. My phone started vibrating. It was Tina, my best friend. She must have noticed I hadn't posted anything for our anniversary and decided to call. I answered, and the moment I heard her voice, everything I'd been trying so hard to hold in finally collapsed. After I told her what had happened, there was a pause on the other end, 3 seconds of pure silence, before she exploded in fury. Jesus Christ, that bastard Jason Miller. That soulless piece of garbage, may he rot. And that bitch Emily, what a perfect pair of trash. Don't be scared. Go home right now and change every single lock. That house was your premarital asset, it's yours. Let them take their shiny new marriage certificate and sleep on the street for all I care. I'm coming over, wait for me. I hung up, staring out at the city drenched in crimson dusk. The sunlight stretched long shadows across the streets, painting everything in gold and red. The sadness and confusion at the bottom of my heart slowly hardened into something colder, sharper, like a thin layer of ice sealing a heart that had finally stopped bleeding. Yes, it was time to end it. A marriage I had poured my soul into preserving turned out to be nothing more than a clumsy performance, its script written with lies and betrayal, and I was the only one left acting. I was the only one who believed and the only one who was shattered. But from that moment on, I swore I would never again be a supporting character in anyone else's story. In the end, Jason Miller and Emily couldn't move into their so-called dream home. The 2 of them had to drag their suitcases, faces twisted in frustration, and settle for a cheap motel nearby. I heard the walls there were paper thin, the soundproofing terrible, and even the paint was peeling off in patches. I didn't need to see it myself, just imagining the 2 of them, from burning with passion to lying in stifling silence in that suffocating little room, was irony enough to make me almost laugh. The next afternoon, I was at work, handling an urgent document when my phone started ringing. I glanced at the number. It was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. A shrill, angry voice burst through the speaker, practically drilling into my eardrum. "Hannah Lee, you vicious woman. What are you trying to do, drive my son to his death?" I didn't need to hear another word to recognize her. It was Mrs. Margaret Miller, Jason's mother. No greeting, no attempt at civility, no pretense of reason. She came at me as though I'd offended her entire bloodline. What did the Miller family ever do to deserve someone as destructive as you? Jason only made a mistake. All men make mistakes. You've already ruined his life, and now you sell the house too? Do you want him to die homeless on the street? I switched to speakerphone and set the phone on my desk. Her shrieking filled the entire office. My fingers kept typing steadily. The report had to be finished before the meeting. I had no time to waste on meaningless noise. When she finally ran out of breath, panting from her own rage, I calmly said, "Mrs. Miller, First, your son and I no longer have any relationship whatsoever. Second, what he did wasn't a mistake. It's called breaking the law. The proper term is bigamy, marrying while still legally married. Third, that house was my premarital asset. Selling it is entirely my right. It has nothing to do with you or your precious son. The line went silent. Not a word. For a long moment she didn't respond. Then her voice shifted, trembling, no longer yelling but sobbing theatrically. What do you mean your house? You married into the Miller family, so you're one of us. What's yours is ours. Don't think you can just do whatever you please. That house, Jason spent money remodeling it. It's their home now. You'd better move out and give it back before this turns into a scandal. Our family can't bear that kind of shame. I almost laughed aloud at her absurd logic. So that was it. The blind indulgence behind every overgrown man-child was always a mother like her. Mrs. Miller, your family's pride is your own to keep. Don't expect me to carry it for you. The house is legally mine, in black and white. As for that so-called renovation money, if you feel wronged, you're welcome to take it to court. And with that, I hung up, not giving her the chance to scream another word. I blocked her number. Then I blocked Jason's. And just for good measure, I blocked every Miller contact I had. That was the first move in my counterattack. In that shabby motel room, Emily lay nestled in Jason's arms. Her eyes were red, her voice trembling as if she might burst into tears. Jason, it's all my fault. If it weren't for me, Hannah wouldn't be this angry. She wouldn't have done something so cruel. She sniffled softly, sneaking glances at him from the corner of her eyes, gauging his reaction. Jason's face was dark, stormy, like the sky before heavy rain. His mother's phone call had already humiliated him beyond words, and my decisiveness had been a slap straight to his pride. From start to finish, he still thought I was the same woman who would always tolerate everything, soft-hearted, obedient, and easy to control. The same Hannah Lee, who once needed only a single word from him to nod in agreement without complaint. Jason, what should we do now? We can't just stay here forever, can we? Emily's voice trembled with grievance as though she were the most pitiful person in the world. Jason ran a frustrated hand through his hair. Every piece of his grand plan had collapsed in one single move from me. His original scheme had been simple: marry Emily, make it a fait accompli, then force me to accept a divorce. Given how I used to be, he must have assumed I'd choose to save face, quietly walking away with nothing, leaving the house to him as an unspoken compromise. But he had misjudged me completely. In Jason's plan, he would kill two birds with one stone. Marry the woman he believed to be his true love, and keep the $1 million house as a permanent foothold in the city. It was supposed to be a perfect strategy, except the player had made the wrong move. Emily glanced at his dark, stormy expression, and her eyes flickered as she came up with an idea. She leaned closer, her voice suddenly softer and more coaxing. Jason, don't be angry. Hannah's just acting out of anger right now. We shouldn't go against her head-on. She's a department manager at a big company, right? People like her care a lot about appearances. Why don't you go to her office and talk to her in person? In a public place, with everyone watching, she'll be too embarrassed to make a scene. Just speak gently, reason with her a little, maybe show some emotion. She still loves you. I'm sure she'll soften up. Those last two words, soften up, hit Jason exactly where his pride lived. His bruised ego began to heal under her sugary words. He nodded inwardly, convinced. Yes, he thought. Hannah's still that same woman, cold on the outside, but soft on the inside. Her mouth might be sharp, but her heart always melts. All I need to do is push a little, and she'll fold. He played out each step of his plan in his mind and felt satisfied. Finally, a smile of smug satisfaction crept onto his face after days of gloom. Only he didn't know, the woman he thought would always yield was no longer the woman I used to be. The next morning, Jason really came. He stood right in the middle of the lobby of the building where I worked, holding up a massive white banner with bold black letters that read, "Immoral wife commits adultery and deliberately hides marital assets." More than a dozen words, all screaming accusations, burned into the eyes of everyone passing by. A ridiculous, pathetic performance in broad daylight. It was rush hour, and the lobby was crowded. Curious, disdainful, judgmental eyes fell on him, and then on me. Each glance felt like a needle pricking through my clothes, stabbing straight into my skin. Colleagues began gathering in small groups, whispering, pointing, and stealing glances in my direction. Their expressions were mixed: confusion, shock, and discomfort. The security guards at the front desk tried to remove Jason, but he clung to the floor like glue, shouting and acting like the most pitiful victim in the world. The company's internal phone lines rang non-stop. My assistant, Kelly Wong, knocked on my office door, her face pale and voice stammering. "Miss Lee, down there, he's—" "I know," I cut her off calmly, closing my laptop. I wasn't panicked, nor did I feel ashamed. Inside, I was as still as a lake without ripples. I stood up, straightened my business suit, and slipped into my high heels. Step by steady step, I left my office and walked straight toward the battlefield downstairs. The moment I appeared, all sound vanished, as if someone had pressed a button to mute the entire building. Every gaze immediately turned toward me. When Jason Miller saw me, his eyes lit up, desperate, like a drowning man spotting a piece of driftwood. He raised his voice dramatically, launching into his script. "Hannah, you finally decided to show yourself. You heartless woman, you sold our family home and want to leave me with nothing. Do you even have a conscience?" His voice trembled, his face twisted with pain as tears streamed down. It was almost convincing, a flawless performance of a pitiful husband, a man victimized by a cruel wife in a loveless marriage. I paid no attention to his ridiculous accusations. I simply walked toward him, stopped right in front of him, and pulled out my phone. I opened the camera and hit record. The red light blinking on the screen felt like a signal that his farce was about to be exposed. "Jason," I said, my voice not loud but perfectly clear. In the heavy silence of the lobby, every word I spoke echoed distinctly in everyone's ears. "You said I committed adultery and tried to hide joint assets, didn't you? We're still legally married, correct?" Caught off guard, Jason stiffened and nodded reflexively. "Of course we are. That's why you can't sell the house on your own." "Good," I nodded slightly, then my tone shifted, sharp, cold as a blade. "Then let me ask you this. What were you doing yesterday at the City Hall marriage office with Emily and a marriage certificate in your hand?" His face went white in an instant. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, as if his throat had been seized shut. He hadn't expected me to know, and he certainly hadn't expected me to expose him here, in public. I didn't give him the chance to recover. I opened my phone's gallery, selected a photo, and held it up for everyone to see. Jason and Emily, embracing and kissing in front of the marriage office, the red marriage booklets clutched in their hands. The image was crystal clear, undeniable. It landed like a slap across his face. The two of them, smiling radiantly in the sunlight, holding those red certificates that screamed newlyweds. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice cutting and icy. "This is the mistake you said every man makes?" The crowded lobby fell completely silent. Then, like a spark igniting dry grass, whispers erupted. "He remarried before the divorce? And then came here to accuse her? Unbelievable. What a hypocrite." Classic case of the guilty one crying victim. In the blink of an eye, the entire tide of public opinion turned. The air shifted, and the moral knife switched hands. The looks people gave me were no longer doubtful. They were respectful, even sympathetic. Every glare directed at Jason was filled with disgust, piercing through him inch by inch. "The woman in that photo looks like his ex-girlfriend. So he was cheating with his old flame, and now he's trying to steal her property too?" The murmur of gossip swelled through the lobby. The curious and judgmental stares that had once been aimed at me were now aimed squarely at him, with pure contempt. Jason's face turned from pale white to an ugly, blotchy red. Enraged, he lunged toward me, trying to grab my phone, but I sidestepped easily, calm and unflustered. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but the words died before they could form. Every excuse, every lie, useless now in the face of undeniable proof. Just then, the head of administration, a sharp, composed, middle-aged woman named Miss Carter, arrived with the security chief, Mr. Brown. She surveyed the scene with a cool, assessing glance, first at Jason, then at me. Her tone was firm but controlled. "Mr. Miller, this is a workplace. Please leave immediately. And Hannah, come to my office for a moment." I nodded, slipped my phone into my bag, and replied clearly, "Miss Carter, I'm sorry for the disruption I've caused the company. This is a personal matter. I'll handle it properly." It won't affect work. She gave me a steady, approving look. She didn't say a word, but her small nod was enough to make the weight in my chest ease a little. Under the dozens of eyes fixed on us, Jason, the man who once believed he held all the power, now looked like a rooster beaten to a pulp, his face pale, his expression crushed. In the end, escorted politely by security, he was led out of the building. That disgraceful scene ended in complete defeat for its own director. The public humiliation at my company was a slap Jason had delivered squarely to his own face, and that very humiliation finally made Emily realize something. Fighting me head-on wouldn't work. The woman named Hannah Lee was not as simple as she thought. So she decided to change tactics. She asked to meet me at a quiet cafe. When she arrived, she wore a pristine white dress, light makeup, and her soft hair flowed down her shoulders. Her appearance was pure, harmless, like some delicate white lotus, untouched by the world. If I hadn't seen her triumphant, smug expression that day in front of the marriage office, I might almost have believed her act of gentleness now. "Hannah," she began, her eyes red, her voice trembling, as though she bore the weight of some ancient injustice. I lifted my coffee cup, took a slow sip, and said nothing. I just watched her calmly, waiting to see what kind of performance she had prepared this time. "I know you hate me," she said, voice thick with emotion. "You hate me because I'm with Jason. But we truly love each other. We've loved each other since college. If I hadn't gone overseas back then, the one beside him wouldn't have been you." She paused, as if choosing her words carefully, then switched to a pleading tone. "Hannah, please, I'm begging you, let him go. I don't want your house or anything else. I just want to be with Jason. We really love each other. Love isn't something that can be traded for material things." As she spoke, tears began to fall, one by one, down her cheeks, so fragile, so pitiful, the kind of sight that could melt any man's heart. Unfortunately for her, I wasn't a man. I looked at her tear-streaked face, at the trembling shoulders that were far too calculated to be sincere. I didn't feel pity. Only amusement. "True love, huh?" I said softly, setting my cup down. The porcelain clinked against the saucer, a crisp sound that echoed through the quiet cafe. "If you don't care about the house, then why did Jason show up at my company waving a banner and making a scene? That was your idea, wasn't it?" Emily's face turned instantly pale, her tears stopping mid-fall. She hadn't expected me to see through her so easily. I met her eyes, my tone calm, no anger, only cold detachment and a trace of contempt, the kind that comes from looking down on something beneath you. "Enough. Stop pretending, Emily. I know exactly what kind of woman you are, even better than Jason does. You're just jealous of everything I have. You think because you met him first, everything I earned, his attention, the house, my position, my life, should have been yours." My words landed like a surgeon's knife, slicing through her immaculate facade and exposing the rotting core beneath it. Emily's face flushed green, then red, humiliated and furious from being so bluntly unmasked. She no longer bothered to act. Wiping her tears away, she glared at me with eyes full of bitterness and resentment. "So what?" She spat through clenched teeth. "What gives you the right to have everything? You were just lucky. You were born into money. If your family hadn't bought that house, do you really think Jason would have married you? You already have everything, a home, a career, a comfortable life. Why can't you just let me have a little happiness? All I want is Jason, just a home like that. Is that really so wrong?" Her voice rose, sharp and trembling with false righteousness, echoing with self-pity and justification, as though she could cleanse her own selfishness by shouting loudly enough. And her ambition, dripping from every word. I looked at Emily's face, twisted by jealousy, and suddenly realized that staying here, continuing this conversation, was a waste of both time and oxygen. I stood up, took a few bills from my wallet, and placed them neatly under the untouched cup of coffee. "Emily," I said evenly, "I'll tell you two things. First, what belongs to someone else will never belong to you. If you want a decent life, earn it yourself. Don't be a parasite, feeding off and draining others." I paused, my voice cool but unwavering. "Second, you didn't lose because I was born into a better family. You lost because of who you are. Someone who steals happiness through manipulation and deceit will never truly have happiness of their own." With that, I turned and walked away without a backward glance, leaving behind nothing but the image of my retreating figure, sharp and final, like a door slamming shut, locking out the past for good. I didn't need to look back to feel her glare, hot, venomous, full of hatred. It was like the hiss of a dying snake, furious but powerless, following me all the way out of the cafe. The sale of the house went surprisingly smoothly, almost silently. The buyers were a young couple about to get married. They placed a deposit the very day they viewed it, and completed full payment a week later. When I saw the long string of numbers appear in my bank account, I didn't feel the rush of triumph I'd imagined. I just felt light, as if the dust had finally settled, as if the heavy stone in my chest had finally been lifted. I used part of the money as a down payment for a small apartment on the other side of the city, a quieter neighborhood, far from the noise, far from old memories. The place wasn't large, but it was filled with sunlight, more than enough for one person to live comfortably. The rest of the money I deposited into a fixed savings account. I didn't need extravagance, I just needed stability, something solid beneath my feet for the future. Tina came to help me move in, pulling up in her bright red convertible as usual, loud and confident. In the trunk were a few bags, just enough for a fresh start, enough to throw away the trash that was my past. "Congratulations, Queen Hannah. Welcome to your new castle," she cheered, raising 2 cans of beer in mock celebration. We sat cross-legged on unopened boxes, drinking beer and dreaming about the future. The afternoon's sunlight streamed through the spotless windows, spilling golden streaks across the floor. For the first time in a long while, I felt like a cicada shedding its shell. To break free from that old layer, I'd had to scrape, claw, and bleed, but I'd done it. I was alive again, reborn into someone new. Everything finally seemed to be settling into place. Life was beginning to move back on its proper track. But just when I thought the nightmare was over, a cold envelope from the court dragged me right back to reality. Jason Miller was suing me. The complaint demanded a division of joint property. He claimed that after our marriage he had spent over 200,000 yuan remodeling and renovating the apartment, with proof of bank transfers. Therefore, he argued, the property could not be considered my separate asset, and he was entitled to half of the proceeds from the sale. I held the petition, reading every deceitful, twisted line, my whole body trembling with anger. But in the end, I only laughed. A low, cold laugh. The blade was out of its sheath, the game board overturned, and the mask finally torn away. The man who had stabbed me in the back had now shown his true form, his sharpest, greediest, filthiest fangs bared for all to see. Without hesitation, I immediately contacted Attorney Zhang, one of the top divorce lawyers in the field. After I explained everything and handed over the relevant documents, his expression darkened. "Miss Lee," he said gravely, "this case is a bit complicated. Even though the deed clearly stated that the apartment was my separate property acquired before marriage, that part was indisputable. But Attorney Zhang explained that if the opposing party could prove that after the marriage Jason Miller had made a significant financial investment in the property, one that substantially increased its value, the court might consider granting him a small portion of the sale proceeds as compensation. 200,000 yuan isn't an enormous amount, he said, but it's not negligible either. It could be troublesome." My heart sank. I hadn't expected Jason to have planned this far ahead. From the very start, ever since he'd begun the renovations, he had been quietly laying the groundwork for this exact moment. Tina, sitting beside me, slammed her hand on the table, furious. "That bastard. Back when he was fixing up the house, he acted like such a sweetheart, saying he'd spent all his savings from years of work to build your dream home together. Turns out it was all a setup, a damn trap." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Panic wouldn't solve anything. I looked directly at Attorney Zhang, my tone steady. "I believe in the law. Please do everything you can to help me. I won't let him take even a single cent more from me." He nodded seriously. "Don't worry, we'll do our best to gather solid evidence. As long as we can prove that his alleged investment was illegitimate, or that the source of the funds was unclear, we'll have a strong chance of turning this around." When I stepped out of the law firm, the sky had turned dark. The wind picked up, and heavy clouds rolled across the horizon, like a warning of an approaching storm. I clenched my fists. A storm was indeed coming. But this time, I wouldn't run. I would face it head on. I began forcing myself to remember every detail of the renovation 2 years ago. That was shortly after we'd gotten married. Not long after, Jason had handed me 200,000 yuan. He said it was his entire savings from 5 years of working, his heartfelt contribution to our home. At the time, I was so touched I nearly cried. I thought I'd married a genuine, responsible man who truly cared about our family. But now, looking back, every moment of that emotion felt like a resounding slap across my own face. I dug through old files until I found the construction contract and the bank transfer receipts related to the renovation. The contract was signed with B&B Interiors, a well-known design firm in the city. When I cross-checked the payment details on my old bank statements, I found something strange. Most of the payments to B&B were transferred directly from my account, exactly as written in the contract. But that 200,000 yuan transfer from Jason was different. The transaction record showed that the recipient was not B&B Interiors, it was an unfamiliar personal account. I remembered it vividly now. At the time, Jason had explained that the account belonged to the brother-in-law of one of B&B's managers, and that paying through him would get us a discount, helping us save quite a bit. I'd been drunk on love back then, so trusting, so foolish. I didn't doubt him for a second. I never imagined that behind that story was a trap being carefully set. But now, everything was clear. That personal account. That was the key. The missing link. I immediately informed Attorney Zhang of my discovery and authorized him to investigate the owner of that account. Around the same time, Emily's social media began to shift. Gone were the pitiful posts about heartbreak and sorrow. In their place appeared subtle, self-satisfied hints of her new life. One day, she posted a photo of an upscale restaurant menu with the caption, "A new beginning deserves a toast." The next, a close-up shot of a glossy real estate brochure. Our dream home is about to come true. Perfect timing. She really did know how to show off. Except, I wasn't even surprised or angry anymore. At this point, all I wanted was to see who would be the one to climb out of this filthy swamp with their head held high. Emily even posted a photo of her hand wearing a diamond ring. She didn't say anything outright, but everyone could see what that meant. It was a silent message meant for me. A smug little announcement that she was about to become the new lady of the house, stepping into the luxury life she had always dreamed of. Every photo, every caption she posted felt like a deliberate jab, a calculated provocation. She didn't have to scream. Her pride oozed through every image. Tina was livid when she saw them. She flooded my WeChat with angry stickers. That fake white lotus is about to grow wings and fly straight to heaven. Just wait. Once I get the evidence, I'll rip that smug face right off her. I stared at Emily's pretentious hollow displays of happiness, and for once I didn't feel a thing. No anger, no bitterness, just calm. Because the more someone flaunts what they have, the more it means they're lacking it. She was impatient now, and so was Jason. And when people lose patience, they make mistakes. They expose the cracks they've tried so hard to hide. I didn't need to move first. All I had to do was wait for them to reveal themselves. Attorney Zhang worked incredibly fast. 2 days later, he called me, his voice tinged with restrained excitement. "Miss Li, we have results. The personal account that received the 200,000 yuan, it belongs to someone named Li Jiangguo." The name sounded plain, forgettable, but the instant I heard it, my chest tightened. I knew that name. That was Emily's father. The truth hit me like lightning, splitting open a clear sky, tearing apart the fog that had clouded my mind for weeks. The renovation money that Jason had always sworn was his hard-earned savings wasn't his at all. It came from the Li family. 2 years ago, right after our wedding, they had already set this trap. That 200,000 yuan was never a gift. It was bait, carefully planted, meticulously planned, waiting for the perfect moment when my guard was down, so they could use it as financial contribution and claim rights over a home that was legally mine alone. A chill ran down my spine. I felt it start from the soles of my feet, crawling upward until it reached the top of my head. Every nerve in my body froze with disgust. A wave of nausea rose in my throat, a raw, instinctive reaction. I couldn't believe it. that a man could calculate against his own wife like this. From those early, sweet days of marriage to the small moments of daily life, every gentle word, every tender touch might have been part of a cold, deliberate, ruthless strategy. I had lived beside this man for 3 years, slept next to him, shared meals with him, trusted him, without realizing I'd been lying next to the very person sharpening the knife to stab me in the back. A man with the face of a lover and the soul of an executioner. I immediately called Tina and told her everything. For a long time, she said nothing. Then suddenly, she exploded like a firestorm. Jesus fucking Christ, what kind of monsters are they? Step by step, they were digging your grave and smiling while they did it. Love? That's not love. They're not even human. That's fraud. Premeditated, organized fraud. This isn't adultery anymore. It's a damn crime disguised as romance. Her voice shook with rage as she shouted into the phone. Hannah, don't you dare be scared. We've got the most important evidence in our hands now. This time, not only will they get nothing, bookmark go back. They won't just walk away empty-handed, Tina had said, her voice sharp with fury. They'll pay for their greed. They'll lose everything, money, reputation, everything. Once the anger passed, we both calmed down quickly and began planning our next move. Now that we had our hands on their weakest point, we couldn't strike too soon. The timing had to be perfect. We would wait for the trial, for the judge, the lawyers, the public audience. We would expose them under the brightest light, in front of everyone. That would be the killing blow. One that would shatter the pretty dream they had built for themselves, leaving it in ruins that could never be rebuilt. A few days before the trial, Jason Miller and his mother, Margaret Miller, showed up outside my new apartment. This time, their arrogance was worse than ever. They must have thought victory was already theirs, because they didn't even bother pretending to be victims anymore. Margaret stood with her hands on her hips, her voice loud and shrill like a rooster crowing after a false victory. Her chin lifted high, her eyes gleaming with self-satisfaction. Hannah Lee, I suggest you know your place. My son spent his money renovating that house. He has every right to half of it. Don't think you can keep it all. If you hand over the money now, things can still end quietly. Otherwise, when we go to court, the one who loses face will be you. Behind her, Jason stood smirking, his posture relaxed, confident, almost triumphant. Hannah, for the sake of our past marriage, I don't want to make a big deal out of this. Just give me half of the sale money, and I'll let everything go. Who knows, maybe one day we could even. He didn't finish, but I knew what he meant. Maybe he thought I'd still want to get back together. I stared at the two of them, those greedy, deceitful faces, and felt nothing. Not anger, not fear, just exhaustion. Talking to them would have been a waste of oxygen. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and called the apartment security. Within minutes, the two of them were escorted out, still shouting obscenities over their shoulders. I didn't respond. I simply shut the window and stood there for a moment, my expression blank. The day of the hearing arrived bright and clear. The sun was out, the sky calm, mockingly peaceful. I wore a crisp black suit and walked into the courthouse beside Attorney Zhang. Inside, I felt an almost eerie sense of calm. It was the feeling of a chess player who had already arranged the board perfectly and now needed only to deliver checkmate. Jason and Emily were already seated at the plaintiff's table, both looking confident. Emily even gave me a little smirk. A smile of challenge, the kind that said she believed the victory was already hers. When the session began, their lawyer opened first. He presented a printed bank transfer record showing the 200,000 yuan, claiming it as the central piece of evidence. His voice was serious, practiced, deliberately dramatic as he described how his client had selflessly contributed a large amount of money toward improving the property. From that, he argued, Jason deserved half of the sale proceeds. Then Jason took the stand. He dove into his role like an actor chasing an award. His voice trembled, his eyes glistened. He spoke of the hardships he'd endured, how he'd lived frugally, saved every penny for their home, sacrificed everything for love. Listening to him, anyone might have believed he was the victim of some cruel injustice. He even looked genuinely moved by his own lies. I turned to glance at the judge. His expression was utterly neutral, unreadable. Then it was our turn. Attorney Zhang stood up, Calm but firm, his words crisp and precise. First, he presented the full set of documents proving the apartment was my premarital asset, the purchase contract, payment records, and the property deed, all dated before our marriage. Then he pivoted smoothly. Your Honor, regarding the alleged 200,000 yuan the plaintiff refers to as renovation expenses, our side has obtained new evidence to submit. He handed a folder to the court clerk. After an independent investigation, he continued clearly, we have confirmed that the recipient of that transfer, Attorney Zhang said clearly, his voice echoing across the courtroom, is a man named Li Jianguo. He paused deliberately before continuing, and Mr. Li Jianguo happens to be the father of Emily Li, the current romantic partner of the plaintiff, Jason Miller. The entire courtroom fell silent. I could literally hear the sound of people holding their breath. At the plaintiff's table, Jason's smug smile vanished instantly. His face cracked like glass, color draining from red to ashen white in seconds. He didn't need to say a word. The sheer panic in his eyes said everything. He knew this was the moment he had lost. Gasps rippled through the room. Dozens of eyes flicked rapidly between the three of us, me, Jason, and Emily, like beams of light cutting across a stage. It felt as if someone had suddenly drained the oxygen from the air. Jason froze in place, his mouth open like a fish out of water, silently gasping for words that wouldn't come. His face was pale as paper. Even his lawyer was visibly flustered, sweat beading across his forehead as he scrambled to collect himself. Attorney Zhang didn't give them the chance. His tone sharpened, firm and precise. Your Honor, we assert that the 200,000 yuan in question was not the plaintiff's personal savings, nor was it a legitimate post-marital contribution to shared property. This amount was transferred from a third party, specifically from the father of the plaintiff's current lover. The intent was neither generosity nor goodwill. It demonstrates clear collusion between the plaintiff and Miss Li, designed to construct a false financial trail for the purpose of unlawfully seizing ownership of the defendant's premarital property. In essence, John continued, his voice cutting like a blade, this was a calculated attempt to manipulate the law, infringe upon the rights of another individual, and corrupt both the sanctity of marriage and the integrity of justice itself. Each sentence landed like a judge's gavel, loud, heavy, and final. I saw Jason's complexion turn gray, his lips trembling uncontrollably. Emily sat frozen beside him, her expression blank, like a porcelain doll that had suddenly cracked. The judge furrowed his brow, his gaze hardening into something glacial. He looked directly at Jason and spoke with calm authority. Mr. Miller, given the defense's arguments and submitted evidence, do you have any response? Jason's lips quivered. His eyes darted from the ceiling to the table, avoiding every glance directed at him. I didn't know, he stammered. That money, it was mine. His voice wavered, every syllable tripping over the weight of his own lies. The judge didn't relent. If that money was truly yours, Mr. Miller, then why was it transferred from the account of Miss Li's father? What is your relationship with this man? Can you provide any proof that this was in fact your personal savings? Jason's mouth opened, but no words came out. He sat there mute, eyes wide with panic. I stayed still, my back straight, eyes locked on him. I didn't need to say a word. Everything was already clear. The judge's voice thundered again, calm, deliberate, but unyielding, each question like a drumbeat pounding directly into Jason's crumbling defenses. Under the relentless rhythm of interrogation, his facade cracked completely. His words became tangled, incoherent, and finally, he fell silent. Then it was Emily's turn. She was called to testify as a witness. She tried her usual tactic, tears and trembling, her soft, fragile act, but under the cool, methodical questioning of both the judge and Attorney Zhang, her mask fell apart piece by piece. Her testimony contradicted Jason's entirely. Every word she spoke only tightened the noose she'd woven for herself. The performance they had built so carefully over 2 years, their grand scheme dressed up as love and devotion, was stripped bare, layer by layer, until nothing remained but its rotten core. In that solemn courtroom, all that was left at the end was the raw, filthy truth of who they really were. The two of them stood there before the judge, stripped bare of every pretense, every mask, every last shred of dignity. They looked like a pair of clowns suddenly robbed of their costumes, exposed and pathetic under the harsh light of justice. I sat quietly in the defendant's chair, my back straight, my hands folded neatly on my lap, watching them stumble and sweat inside the witness box. It was over. Finally, it was all over. The final verdict came exactly as I had expected. The court rejected Jason Miller's entire claim. The apartment, as well as all proceeds from its sale, was officially recognized as my personal property acquired before marriage, completely unrelated to him in any form. Furthermore, since the plaintiff's side had shown clear signs of malicious litigation and intentional disruption, all legal fees were to be paid by Jason Miller. When the sound of the gavel struck, I exhaled deeply, a breath that seemed to carry years of exhaustion with it. Stepping out of the courthouse, I was momentarily blinded by the afternoon sunlight, bright and dazzling, yet somehow the light inside me was even brighter. Behind me, Jason and Emily Lee shuffled out, their faces gray, shoulders slumped, looking like a pair of stray dogs kicked to the curb. Gone was the arrogance, the swagger, the false confidence. As soon as they stepped off the courthouse steps, Emily suddenly shoved Jason's hand away, her voice shrill with rage. "Damn it, Jason. You useless piece of trash. You said you had everything under control, so what now? The house is gone, the money my family put in is gone. How the hell am I supposed to face my parents?" Jason, already seething with anger, snapped back immediately. "You're blaming me. You're the one who told me to use your father's account. Now that everything's blown up, you're pinning it all on me?" "I told you?" she shouted, hysterical. "Who was it who swore up and down that you could keep Hannah under your thumb? Who promised that you'd get the house, that we'd have that perfect life? And look at us now. Who's the idiot that got us dragged into this mess?" They were yelling at each other in the middle of the street, right outside the courthouse, with crowds passing by in every direction. Their argument devolved into finger-pointing, then into shoving, and finally, into a full-blown scene. People stopped to stare, whispering among themselves. Not one of them looked sympathetic, only eyes full of disdain and heads shaking in disgust. I stood at a distance, then quietly turned away. I didn't look back. The show was over. That chapter of my life had closed, and I no longer had any part in it. Behind me, Emily, furious and unhinged, swiped at Jason's face with her freshly manicured nails like a rabid cat. Jason shoved her hard and she fell backward onto the pavement. They kept struggling, screaming at each other, their curses echoing down the street. A crowd gathered, pointing, murmuring, filming, laughing, watching the once perfect couple destroy each other in public. It was ugly, humiliating, pitiful. I didn't stop, I didn't watch. I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, started the engine, and eased the car into motion. As the city traffic swallowed me, I took one last glance in the rearview mirror. Through the glass, I could faintly see them, two broken figures thrashing in the middle of the street, trapped in the contempt of the world. I withdrew my gaze. I didn't turn back, not even for a second. They weren't worth it. The trial was over, but the farce wasn't. Because after learning that her daughter had not only failed to marry into wealth but had also lost the entire 200,000 yuan, the court officially ruled that the Lee family's investment was an unlawful transaction, granting them no right to reclaim a single cent. When Emily's parents learned their money was gone, and the court had branded their involvement as fraudulent, they reportedly saw red. The Liss stormed straight to Margaret Miller's house, screaming and cursing so viciously that the entire neighborhood called security to break it up. On one side was the loud, overbearing mother-in-law, used to throwing tantrums. On the other, the temperamental parents of a mistress with more pride than sense. The two families clashed like wild animals, fighting over those 200,000 yuan, snarling, shrieking, clawing at each other like stray dogs over scraps. The chaos apparently rattled the entire block until the police had to intervene. As for Jason Miller, his downfall was no less brutal. From waving that humiliating banner in front of my office to losing spectacularly in court, his scandals had spread through the professional community like wildfire. Everyone knew the story now, how he had registered a new marriage before even finalizing a divorce, how he'd colluded with his mistress to seize his ex-wife's property. He became a walking punchline. Not long after, his company terminated his employment for damaging the firm's reputation. The house was gone, his money gone, and now his career too. Everything he'd built in this city, he'd destroyed with his own hands. When he hit rock bottom, he came to find me again. That night, I found him waiting outside my apartment complex. He looked emaciated, unshaven, hollow-eyed, like someone 10 years older than his actual age. When he saw me, his expression flickered with something between guilt and desperation. "Hannah," he said, his voice cracking. "I was wrong. I swear, I know I was wrong. I was blinded. I let Emily manipulate me. Please, give me another chance. Let's start over. I'll be good to you this time, I promise. I'll love you with everything I have. We can remarry, right?" I stared at him as though he were a stranger on the street. Without answering, I calmly pulled out my phone and called building security. "Hello, there's a strange man loitering by the gate," I said evenly. "He's harassing me. Please come handle it." Jason froze, eyes wide with disbelief, staring into my face, into the cold, unreadable calm of a woman who no longer cared. There was no anger, no pity, no love left, only detachment. Moments later, the guards arrived. Under their quiet insistence, he finally lowered his head and walked away, taking with him his cheap apologies and that unwilling look of defeat. I stood there in the hallway light, warm and golden, but I didn't turn back. I knew this much with absolute certainty. There was no longer any place for him in my life. A year later, I used part of the money from selling the house, along with the savings I'd built over the years, to open a small design studio with Tina. We only accepted projects that inspired us, that meant something. Business was still modest, clients few, and income steady but humble. Yet every day was filled with energy, laughter, and a quiet sense of purpose. On the balcony of my new apartment, I grew pots of flowers and herbs. I adopted a lazy ragdoll cat who loved curling in my lap. On sunny afternoons, I brewed floral tea, held my cat close, and sat in my rocking chair reading as sunlight streamed through the glass windows, spilling across the rug and the green leaves. My life now was peaceful, free, and full of hope. Sometimes, through old acquaintances, I still heard bits and pieces about Jason and Emily. After the scandal, they'd fought constantly under the weight of shame and public gossip. Eventually, they broke up. Emily never did marry into wealth as she dreamed. Her reputation had been permanently tarnished after the lawsuit, and she eventually settled in a hasty marriage with a man far below her expectations, living a drab, disillusioned life. Jason, meanwhile, drifted from one odd job to another, struggling to stay afloat. No company wanted to hire him. No one wanted his name associated with theirs. I felt nothing when I heard it. No satisfaction, no pity, no nostalgia. Everything connected to them was, to me, nothing more than a story that had ended long ago, one that belonged to another lifetime. And I was finally free to begin mine.